Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for being here today. My name is James Fitzpatrick, and on behalf of Building America's Future, I'd like to welcome you to our ongoing America's Future Tour, a policy series launched late last year to address some of the most pressing and important issues of our time. The mission of Building America's Future is to inform and empower Americans to take ownership of our country's policy direction and demand that our government at all levels enact policy reforms to improve the lives of Americans and make America's future strong. Today, we are discussing strengthening Pennsylvania's families. As a father of 6 daughters and a thought leader with detailed policy proposals on how to make stronger and better American families, we look forward to hearing from our special guest, Dave McCormick.
Hey everybody, how are you?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jen Schorn, Bucks County District Attorney. Before I begin and introduce Dave McCormick, I would just like to tell you a moment about myself. I'm a prosecutor, and I've been a prosecutor in this county for 25 years. I've been fortunate enough when Matt Weintraub, my colleague and friend and mentor, became a judge, I was appointed to fill his term, and I look forward to earning the right to become elected DA in 2025. I say that because there are a few things that are critical to us in our community, and that is our safety, the safety of our children, the safety of our families, and the safety of our law enforcement. When I was asked today to introduce Dave McCormick, I was humbled, and it was truly an honor. To say that this is such a privilege, I want to back up for a moment. As many of you know, I'm sure all of you know, Dave McCormick was born in the western part of the state to parents who were educators, public school teachers, both mom and dad working. Ultimately, Dave went to high school in Bloomsburg, where he was obviously very accomplished academically and athletically as a wrestler, such that he earned an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. What a privilege and honor to have someone here who has served our country in that capacity, but it didn't stop with his West Point appointment. He served our country in the Gulf War in the first phase, leading men and women, clearing minefields, and destroying enemy munitions. After that, Dave worked in the private sector, but then had the privilege to work under George W. Bush for the U.S. Department of Treasury for international affairs. And what an honor. Dave continued working in the private sector, and now we are so privileged to have him as the representative for the Republican Party for Pennsylvania and the United States Senate. It will truly be an honor to have Dave serve this Commonwealth in that capacity. And as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Bucks County, I could not be more proud to be here today to introduce Dave.
Thank you so much. Are we going to introduce the other people, or what's the format of that?
Yes, I believe that we're going to go around and introduce. So as mentioned, you know who I am. And to my left, if you would introduce yourself, please, Priscilla.
Hi, my name is Priscilla Rhyme. I'm here today to talk about IVF and about how it has impacted my life.
And then to Dave's right is Representative Kristin Marcell, my friend, someone who I have a great deal of respect for, who serves this Commonwealth as a state representative. Kristin?
Thank you, Jen. So my district is Ricetown Township, most of Northampton Township, Upper Southampton, and Warwick. And prior to being a state representative, I served as a school board member for Council Rock School District and also for the Middle Bucks Institute of Technology here in Bucks County. Thank you.
And then finally, Billy Walker, who is he runs the Republican committee for Temple University, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And Billy, if you want to elaborate on what you've accomplished.
Yeah. I'm a 20-year-old junior political science major at Temple University. I lead the college Republicans locally at my university and throughout the state as vice chair.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Awesome panel. Jennifer, thank you for that great introduction, and thank you for your service, sort of leading the charge in
You're
Bucks County and making Bucks County a place where we can have safe families and safe communities, which kind of law and order is the foundation. And I'm really grateful for Building America's Future for hosting this event. They've been hosting a series of discussions across the Commonwealth on important issues of the day. And for me, this is a great opportunity because I'm obviously running for the Senate, and I want to run a campaign which talks about the most important issues and lays out a positive agenda. So politics is a contact sport, so we're going to have to make sure we're differentiating and making it clear how Senator Casey, in my opinion, has failed the people of Pennsylvania. But equally important is laying out a positive vision for the future and the things you can do as a United States Senator to make a real difference. And so today is a great opportunity to talk about something that's really important to me, I think important to all Pennsylvanians, which is families. And we've got a real challenge today in Pennsylvania. We got a challenge across America, the replacement rate. So the birth rate at which families are having kids is less than it needs to be to keep America's population at the same level. We're declining. So our replacement rate is 1.8, our birth rate is 1.8%, 1.8 children per family, and you need about 2.1 to keep our population growing. So we're declining. People are having children less and less. It's harder and harder to have families, and part of the reason it's harder is because economically it's becoming more and more difficult with inflation that's happened under President Biden, Kamala Harris, and Bob Casey, who's voted for all those drivers of inflation, the war on fossil fuel and so forth. It costs a lot more to have families. Prices are up 22% from what they were when President Biden took office. And this isn't the only contributor, obviously, to the decline in having kids, but it's becoming more and more difficult because it's harder to get high-paying jobs. It's harder to have a household that can afford to have kids. And if you have one kid, it's harder to have another kid because it's more and more expensive. So a couple weeks ago, I laid out a pro-family agenda, the kinds of things that I thought the government should do to support families and support people that want to have families that are struggling to do so. The first and most important thing we can do is obviously stop the inflation. So we need to get our economy back on track. We need to get pro-growth economic policies. We need to get our spending under control. But I laid out a set of things which I'll touch on very briefly, and then I want to hit one of the ones that is particularly important. But we need to allow, from having children all the way through our seniors, we need to allow and support families. So one of the key issues is allowing families to access affordable faith-based or community care. Particularly if you have two working parents, it's really important to have community child care, rather. So that's a key issue. School choice, which I know many of you have focused on in this community. School choice is the most important way to ensure that our children have the best opportunity. Right now there is school choice for people that have wealth. There's not school choice for people that are lower down on the economic ladder. So as a senator, I would argue for and put in place and introduce legislation that would allow people to make charitable contributions that would be tax-free to school choice, to give scholarships to young people to be able to have the school of their choice, and allow parents and children to select the school that makes most sense for them. I would also double down on the child tax credit that was in the Trump tax cuts that were put in place under his presidency. That was $1,000. I would argue for and propose a $2,000 child tax credit as part of the paid family leave tax credit, make it permanent. And I would also create tax-free savings accounts that would allow parents to have up to $10,000 a year set aside tax-free that they could use for child care. These are all things that would make it more possible for families to have children and to be able to afford children at a time when it's increasingly difficult. The final thing I do, which we can talk about at some length, is have a tax credit for IVF, fertility treatments, because when I was a CEO at Bridgewater, one of the things we did was we had a benefit where, whether it was a man or a woman, we would pay for fertility treatment to help them have children. And if you were someone who was at the lower end of the salary range, IVF is $15,000 to $30,000 per person, and it doesn't always work. So you sometimes need multiple treatments. As a consequence of that, there were Lots of people who could afford IVF and many people who couldn't. And so we put that benefit in place, and it changed people's lives. It allowed everybody to have the joy of parenting if they wanted to, particularly women that were in our workforce that had waited a little bit later and needed fertility treatment to be able to have children. So I proposed a fertility treatment tax credit, an IVF tax credit, that would allow $15,000 of tax credit in multiple years to help child rearing, to help having children be available to everyone. That's the kind of policy, that's the kind of agenda, that's the kind of positive, optimistic outlook for the future I think we need for our country, and a pro-family agenda to help our families and our communities. So that's at the core of what I wanted to talk about, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce that, and then I'm happy to hear from the panel. Thank you.
So one of the things I failed to mention in my opening remarks were that a few years ago I had the privilege of meeting Dave McCormick. And quite frankly, I'll level with you. I was intimidated, having researched his background. I'm a prosecutor. I like to be prepared. I was quite in awe, and I expected to meet someone who would give some pleasantries and move on. And the first thing we started talking about was that he was a father of 6. He and his wife have 6 daughters, and we were talking about everyday issues that relate to all of us. Our children, the safety of our children, our families, and our future. And that blew me away. It just meant that Dave is the real deal. And so truly that's why today was an honor. So with that, there are some questions we have for the panel. So Representative Marcell, you're a former school board member and a mom of 2. What has been the impact of social media on your young children today? And there's a follow-up to that. What have you done as a mom, school board member, and now a state representative to address your concerns?
Thank you so much. It's a very important question. So I have 2 children. My daughter is 14 and my son is 9. I actually spent some time talking to my daughter last night about this issue because I wanted to just get some thoughts from her. As a mom, social media, technology is great, but social media can be very concerning. And because I was a school board member before being a state representative, for years I've had parents reaching out to me saying, like, what can we do? We don't even know what we should be looking for because technology is so different, and so what are the tools that we can use? So as a school board member, we would try to help the district to be able to put programs on. So there were some programs in the evening where parents could come and learn more about ways to protect their children, things to keep an eye out for. As a mother, I've had my own moments. There was a moment actually a few months ago where my daughter was trying to convince me to let her go meet someone that she met online, and it was another young person, but we talked about the reality of, well, who is the person behind that? And it was a good learning lesson for me and also for my daughter. I will also say that at the Council Rock School District, for 8th grade students, at least at Newtown Middle School, they show a movie called The Social Dilemma, which is on Netflix. I would advise a lot of parents to watch that movie. It might scare you, but it's the reality of how a lot of the social media platforms are there so that people are reacting and swiping, and it can become addictive for the person who is using that particular app. And so I think that there are a lot of issues that we need to look at because there are unfortunately, some students and people's children that are having addiction problems, depression from this. My daughter talked about fear of missing out, that you didn't see that one thing that happened and all you want to do is get back on your phone instead of spending time face to face and talking to people the good old days of putting your phones away, which we try to do a lot in my household. And also it can unfortunately create like an unhealthy body image because there's so many apps where you can change how you look. It's something that I think we need to be focused on as parents because predominantly we're the ones seeing it, we're the ones that are trying to make sure that our children are taking the right steps, and we're a huge part of that. But there are other things that I think our schools can be doing, our state and federally. And I will just mention that there are some programs that parents can use to monitor what their kids are doing. That's something people can look into. And then finally, at the state level, we have been trying to look at some legislation from the state perspective. And there's actually one of my colleagues from the southwest part of the state, Stephanie Schlaba. She actually has a Kids Online Safety Act, which I'm still taking a look at to see, what that would do and some of the benefits for that. But it's definitely a thing that we are looking at, because this is a huge issue that I think all of us need to address, from the school district, community level, all the way up to, our senators and in Washington, D.C. So thank you.
And just to echo what Kristin mentioned, we're seeing, in Bucks County, we have predators that are on various social media sites, and our internet service providers have to alert law enforcement if they have images that they suspect may contain child pornography. But what's critical is we need to continue to fund law enforcement to make sure the men and women who are highly trained to monitor and receive those tips can follow through. We had a single image Snapchat shared with suspected child pornography that led to the identification of multiple child victims being raped by a predator in Bucks County. If we don't have law enforcement, the support from the top for law enforcement, we lose our safety, and the most vulnerable among us are victimized. So just to echo what Representative Marcell said, Senator McCormick, the next question, is there something you wanted to say as it relates?
I wanted to, first of all, I can't wait to be senator, but right now
Oh, excuse me, my apologies.
I'm not going to, I don't want to jinx myself.
My apologies.
I'm the wannabe senator, but working hard to get that. Well, I just want to echo what you said. One of the things that I think we should consider at the federal level is, and by the way, I have 6 daughters, 23 to 17. So if I'd have proposed this a couple of years ago, they might have not been talking to me. But I would say parental restrictions or restrictions on social media for children 16 and under. And then there's a debate on whether 16 and under you would have a complete ban on the use of social media apps, or whether you'd have a very rigid parental approval process where a kid couldn't get access to the app without a rigorous way of verifying it. But there's no doubt. I've looked very recently at the research on it. There's no doubt that there's the addiction you talked about. There's some question of the causality on mental health, and whether it's children with mental health are spending more time on social media, whether social media is the cause of that. But what we do know is that it's a rich environment for predatory behavior. We know that our kids can get access to things that we do not want them as parents to have access to at that age. And right now it's completely unregulated, and it needs, you will rarely see me saying this is an area where we need more government. that's not normally going to come off my lips, but this is an area where I think, because of the vulnerability of our kids, that we need to take a pretty firm stand on protecting our children from the wealth of potential bad things they could get into on social media.
Thank you. Billy, the next question is for you. You chair the College Republicans at Temple, so you are the closest to 16 among us. What was an online elementary and middle school like for you? And the second part to that is, further, what's your reaction to Dave's proposal to ban social media for kids under the age of 16?
Well, I want to start off by saying I unequivocally support the McCormick plan to ban social media for kids under the age of 16. Drawing from my own experiences in elementary and middle school, I recall, kids getting in trouble for things that they posted as young as the 5th grade. A lot of kids lack the maturity and understanding of social media's permanence, and that, what you post, even if you delete it, it never truly gets deleted, and that has unintended consequences. But most prominently, what I remember is the mental health struggles of my fellow classmates and friends. When kids use such social media at such a young age, and this is something I've experienced growing up with it, it becomes addictive like a drug. The U.S. Surgeon General has said that social media is as addictive as cigarettes, and that it triggers chemicals in the brain that are triggered from usage of drugs like cocaine. And research shows that 59% of teenagers have been cyberbullied. So what I've seen is when you become so addicted, doing what may seem like the common sense thing of just turning off the screen becomes, everything but obvious. And what happens is, as I've seen so many times, and it hurts to even say, I've seen this lead to anxiety, depression, anorexia, and even self-harm and suicidal behaviors in people I was close with, and in so many instances. And suicide is one of the leading causes of death among preteens and teenagers 10 to 15 years old, and there's no doubt that the spike, I think, is a result of social media. So I think far too many Pennsylvania families have lost kids to suicide because of mental health issues by social media, and I think Dave's plan will undoubtedly strengthen families across the Commonwealth. And I just want to say I commend Dave for his willingness to take on the social media tech giants to fight for the kids and families in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Billy. And just one final comment before we move on to the next subject, to echo what Billy's saying. Not only do we see online predators preying upon kids for sexual deviant purposes, but similarly, we're seeing overseas and local predators who are trying to exploit kids for fraudulent purposes, portraying themselves as an adolescent. Kristin mentioned her daughter receiving an invite to meet somebody. Oftentimes that's occurring, and in fact, the relationship develops online to sending images, naked, intimate images, and next thing you know, they're exploiting that child, and they're aiming for adolescent-age kids. The highest risk is adolescent boys, believe it or not. And we have found that the suicide rates that accompany those sextortion cases are just outrageous and heartbreaking. In our neighboring county, in Montgomery County, thanks to local and state and federal law enforcement officers, they identified sextorters overseas who ultimately their actions did result in a young boy taking his own life. So again, it's a critical topic that we keep the communication open and we keep, supporting people who are going to make a difference. So I'm going to move on to the next topic. So Priscilla, I know you're an IVF mother. If you would tell us about your experience.
Sure. So first of all, I'm really happy to be here today and be asked for this. There's not a lot of spotlight on IVF. And going through it is really emotional. So Tom and I had an infertility journey that turned into a 5-year deal. It started with us getting pregnant naturally. The pregnancy became a topic within the first month. I had emergency surgery, which resulted in the removal of one of my fallopian tubes. Because of my age and the time of having only one fallopian tube left, our doctor suggests we use IUI to get pregnant. Over the next 18 months, we went through 4 IUI cycles. Those cycles resulted into a failure of a miscarriage, a failure of the last IUI with another ectopic pregnancy with an emergency surgery again. I can't believe, I'm going to get upset about this, I'm sorry. I can't begin to tell you how emotional roller coaster we were over the last 2 years. We had 3 more years to go. After the last ectopic pregnancy, our doctor said we only had a 5% chance of getting pregnant now, and suggests we go through IVF. And in vitro fertility, our emotional roller coaster just got worse. Like most infertility couples, the desire to have a child can be overwhelming. It led us to feeling grief, frustration, and disappointment. Now we had to add another financial burden on the IVF, and the process IVF was emotionally draining enough. The IUI cycles we had were mostly covered by my insurance. The IVF cycles weren't covered by my insurance. IVF is an expensive cost. It varies in the United States. A single IVF cycle can cost up to $20,000, including the procedure. Treatment and medication. A few states mandate that insurance cover fertility treatments. Pennsylvania does not mandate coverage. Over the next 3 years, we went through 4 IVF cycles. The cost out of pocket was over $80,000 for both of us. The last IVF cycle we did, we used our wedding fund money at the time because it was the last Hail Mary straw of it all. So luckily on the 4th cycle, success, because we were running out of resources, we went a lot. A lot of couples couldn't afford the financial burden of 1 cycle, let alone 4. Why 4 IVF cycles? Because IVF isn't guaranteed success. According to stats we were given, the average overall age couple needs 2.5 cycles to have a successful live birth. Most couples can afford 1 cycle, alone 3 cycles they need in order to have a child through IVF. Our journey ended on our 4th cycle. IVF with great news. We were pregnant. After 5 long years, on April 9th, 2013, we welcomed our daughter, Francesca, into the world. The importance of the story and the discussion we are having here today is to hopefully advance the conversation that leads to solutions that make it easier financially and emotionally to have and raise families in Pennsylvania. And I'm so proud and happy to be here and talking about this, because if you haven't gone through it, it's a nightmare. And people I work with, I'm also a business owner, and the girls that I work with cry. And every day I tell them, don't give up. It's long, it's emotional, and it's hard.
Amazing.
Thank you. Representative Marcell, I know you're a mom of 2 who has 2 siblings from IVF. Let's start there. Did your mom and dad share this experience with you?
Thank you so much for your question. I wanted to first just thank Priscilla for sharing her story, being so brave. I have a number of friends, actually a friend who just started, and it's such a stressful process to go through and so emotional, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing, because I know that's a lot to do. And I have some friends that are open to sharing, and then some friends that don't want to share those details, but for us to be able to address those issues from a policy perspective, we need to know that. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Priscilla.
Thanks.
And so the IVF story that I have is that my siblings are from IVF, and they are in their 30s, so this was a while ago, but still very expensive and things that weren't covered by insurance. And I don't know the details because I was a child/teenager when my stepmother and my dad were going through this process. But for us, it meant a lot that we could complete our family that way. So my dad and my stepmother got married, and they really wanted to have children, and they kept trying and trying. It wasn't working. They went through IVF as a process. Thankfully, it worked. I don't know how many tries they had just because I was a kid, so they weren't sharing all the details. But I know that it was very stressful for them. It was very expensive. I do have memories of when my stepmother was going through different stages of the process. My older sister and I, trying to help around the house and to bring her things and to try to be as helpful as possible to make her comfortable. And so, I think that for so many people, whether they're starting a family or completing a family, if IVF is an option for them, that's a great miracle, to be able to actually have a child that way and to have your dream of either starting a family or completing a family. And so I appreciate that we are looking at policy ideas for how we can help that to become a reality, because it shouldn't be that because you can't afford to do the process that you just don't get the opportunity. And so I'm glad that, obviously there are some insurance aspects of this now as compared to, decades ago. And the technology improves, so hopefully more and more people can continue to have their dreams come true. But I wanted to thank Priscilla for sharing her story, and then thank Dave for thinking of how we could help families to financially be able to do it, because it means a lot to people. All of the moms and dads, and the future moms and dads that are trying so hard to be Priscilla, they just want to be successful and have their family. It means a lot, so just wanted to thank you for that.
Dave, would you like to expand on the issue? I know that you have a proposal to provide a sizable child tax credit for fertility services. If you could tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you, and Priscilla, thank you for sharing that. And I'm a father of 6 daughters. I had 4 daughters, and then remarried and have 2 more. So I have 17 to 23, 6 daughters, and we didn't experience IVF personally, but obviously have experienced the joy parenthood, the challenges of parenthood, but also the joys of parenthood. But as a CEO, one of the things that we were struggling with was we wanted to retain great women in our company, and many women were pushing off the timing of having children based on their career ambitions and so forth. But then as they decided to have children later in life, were struggling. And so I lived through this with close friends and colleagues, women that I knew well. At Free Markets, which was the company I worked in and was the CEO of in Pittsburgh, but then subsequently in Bridgewater, another company that I ran. And it was a real struggle. And it's a struggle in all the ways Priscilla said. This is observing. I'm not pretending that I know exactly what it feels like, obviously, but it was a real struggle for them. And I began to realize at a point it wasn't just a struggle in managing all the things that you're talking about. It was a financial struggle, which was truly, many people couldn't afford it. So it just became those who could afford it could do it and those who couldn't. And that seemed like a terrible screening, that the people that were making a certain amount of money could have the joy of parenthood and others couldn't. So that was when we started to think about an IVF benefit for men or women who were in our company, that we would pay for that treatment, which is very expensive, obviously, but it became the single most important thing for those who really couldn't afford it. It was life-changing for those who could afford it. The fact that the company was with them in this journey to have families was a huge message that the company was sending to them in terms of what we valued. So it became something that I was very, very proud of, and the people that impacted most would come back, and I'd get to know their kids and get notes from them, and it just became meaningful, which is why when I started to think about an agenda, pro-family agenda, in the Senate, this thing came to mind as a way to make it more financially accessible for all families. It shouldn't just be people that can afford it should have kids, and we shouldn't force women to opt out of careers because they want to have the maximum chance to have children at an early age and forego career opportunities because they can't afford fertility treatment down the road. So that was the essence of it. It's also, I think, when we talk about Republicans, we talk about reproductive rights, social issues. Everybody focuses on abortion, and obviously this is a very polarizing issue in our country. My position on that, which I'm asked all the time, is that I want to find common ground. I'm not for either extreme. I'm not for abortion bans. I'm also not for national legislation. I'm for the 3 exceptions. But I'm also not for the position that would allow abortion up until the due date. 90% of the time is spent on that question, on that issue. But yet we have a law. We have a law in Pennsylvania. It's a law that's been supported by Republicans and Democrats. It was signed into law by a governor named Casey. So that issue is kind of decided in Pennsylvania. That issue is, the voters have decided. But there's so much more about reproductive rights that I think we should be thinking about and talking about. And I say this with humility as a man and a father of 6 daughters and a very strong wife, that they want to hear less from me about reproductive rights. But as a public official, I think we should be supporting widely available contraception. I think we should be spending a lot of time focusing on adoption services. I think we should spend lots of time thinking about how to afford families in the way I was talking about before, child tax credits and those kinds of things. And I think IVF is one of those ways that we can really be pro-family, and who could disagree that this is an opportunity that we should allow everyone to have.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe then finally is concluding remarks. Anything additional you would like to say on either topic, or anything else?
I just want to say thank you. First of all, thank you for everybody for being here, and thank you for each of you. Thank you, Representative, for being here, for your leadership on these issues, and the fact that you started your political career as a school board member, I think, is sort of at the red hot center of where we can make the most difference. And so thank you for getting into the arena. Billy, thank you for getting in the arena early on here and trying to help shape the future with your generation. Everything we're talking about is really about your generation. Us old timers have most of our times behind us, but for all of you, this is the future. And thank you for sharing your story. And I'm so excited that you have 11-year-old daughter, is that
Thanks,
right?
yeah.
Who's, I'm sure, the joy of your life. And thank you for hosting this. So my goal is simply to put this set of issues front and center for the kinds of things we should be thinking about, the kind of proactive agenda we should have on our minds to help promote families. I think we have a crisis in our country on money levels. We have an economic crisis. I think we have a spiritual crisis. The one thing that I think most people agree on is good, strong, sound families are a big part of making sure we have a successful American future. And whatever our partisan disagreements are on many things, and there's many disagreements, hopefully we can agree on that. And so as a senator, I want to be somebody that's proactively thinking about these issues, hopefully in a way that appeals to people on all sides of the aisle. And if there's good ideas on the other side, I would be someone who would embrace those. I'm a Republican and a conservative, but more than anything else, I'm a patriot and someone who wants to serve the great people of Pennsylvania. And these topics, I think, transcend party. So thank you for having me, and really appreciate all of you being here.
Yeah.
We want to take questions from you.
Questions? Yeah.
Captain Cola, my number, 42 years elected. I support everything with your family issues and have strongly for many, many years. When are we going to get the public to hear these messages as opposed to the terrible things that are out there, your airplane, China, and everything?
Yeah, this is an unfortunate thing about politics, because I'm learning the hard way. People can lie a lot, and so you have to figure out how much of your time and energy you're going to spend on a forward agenda, talking about where you want to take the country, making sure you make it clear where you think your opponent has failed, and then how much of your time you're going to spend responding to attacks. So recently there was an ad about fentanyl, and me supporting a company so that was a lie, and so I responded to that with an ad, and I will do an ad eventually on IVF, and so there will be a combination of proactive, forward-looking things about the future, and responding to attacks. But I don't want to have my entire campaign be responding to lies that the other side said, because I'm afraid that that's sort of the game the opposition would want me to play, as opposed to laying out a proactive vision for the future. So it's a balancing act. My mom and dad call me every day and say, "Oh my God, you see what they're saying now? You got to respond," which I feel that need to respond to. But I want to respond mostly with, I think people are sick of the lies. I think people smell it, and I want to mostly respond to the future.
Thank you. I believe Representative Marcell would like to say something.
I very quickly just wanted to thank Dave. So I mentioned my colleague Stephanie Schlaba, who was the author of one of the bills, the social media bills, earlier. And Stephanie Schlaba was next to Dave at the assassination attempt of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. And she was very traumatized by it, but told me that she felt that she was protected and she felt better and safer because Dave was next to her. And so I just wanted to thank you, because it meant a lot to her and it meant a lot to us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'll come back.
Thank you.